Guess what I got the other night? It was completely unexpected, and I'm so happy because I was running out of the last bottle of it and I was waiting for another one of these magical things to sweep into town so I could stock up. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing one of my favourite and all-time most powerful witchy tools ever, storm water. Hey there witches, and also people that are not witches but are interested in witchy shizzle. Since I started my Rambling Witch series late last year on the channel, I think it was September, October kind of time, I have been asked by several people via email why I've stopped doing them and when I was planning, or if I was planning, to reintroduce them as a series on the channel. But actually, if you take a look at the videos that were kind of prefixed with the Rambling Witch series title, you'll notice that those videos are still up on the channel. I've still kept them, but I just got rid of the Rambling Witch title because I felt like the videos that I put out that were supposed to be part of my Rambling Witch series were really not very rambly. They were pretty specific, you know, they were pretty much on topic, and I didn't feel like I actually was rambly, because I guess to a lot of people, and to me myself, rambling is kind of something different. When you break it down and look at the definition of what rambling is, let's break it down and look at what the definition of rambling is. You know that you are a professional tarot reader when your iPhone cover looks like that. Okay, so the first definition is lengthy and confused or inconsequential. I think that's more what I'm trying to get at, because some of the synonyms include long-winded and verbose and wordy. So when I say that I ramble and people say, oh, you don't ramble though, you know, you really get to the point. I think when I say that I'm rambly, I mean that I am like loquacious. I like to say a lot of words. I say more words than is necessary. Rambling Witch is going to adhere more to that first part of the definition, which is about it being like confused or inconsequential, and no doubt invariably it will be lengthy. What I'm going for with Rambling Witch is a much more relaxed vibe than you will have seen in the original videos that I titled for the series. So, you know, rather than just sticking to one topic and giving you all of the information on that topic, I would rather just sit and actually ramble. I would rather that it be inconsequential and not very well thought out and not very well planned. And that's kind of what I want the series to be like. So hopefully this will be the first of many. I'm in that weird hot drink, cold drink mood today. Does anybody else get them, where you need a hot drink and a cold drink? Like, it's just, they're a marriage made in heaven sometimes. Got me some storm water. Most of the time when a storm occurs in this country, it doesn't really last for very long. You know, like when the thunder and lightning comes and you get the rain is probably not going to stick around for all that long. So if I'm not aware that a storm is coming through, which I normally am because my boyfriend is like a ridiculous weatherman kind of guy who always seems to know what's going on with the weather, but if I'm not aware that a storm is coming through, then it's highly unlikely that I'm going to bother to like run to the kitchen and get a jug and position the jug so that I can get some storm water, because normally by the time you're aware that it's you've got rain and you've got thunder, it's pretty much going to be over by the time you get any significant amount. That's my experience of what storms are like, particularly at this time of year. Summer storms might last a bit longer, but spring storms are really just like in and out, you know. But this storm came along and neither my boyfriend or I were at all aware that it was going to happen. There was some amazing fork lightning and sheet lightning. It was crazy. It lit up our whole room. The skylines around here are amazing. It's just incredible. Like, our flat overlooks the sea, and to watch fork and sheet lightning like dancing across the open sea like some kind of mad theatre of light, it's just unbelievable. It's so transpersonal. I started to realise after a while that the rain had not let up. You know, it had really been raining for like a good 5 minutes and I saw no sign that it was going to stop raining, and suddenly out of nowhere I was like, do you know what, do you think I should get the jug? And Danny was like, yeah, go and get it, go and put it on the roof. So we have like a nice little sit out on the roof type situation out on this side of the flat. So I went and got my Pyrex jug, and I woke up in the morning and I had actually gotten quite a bit of storm water in there. I'm absolutely delighted because I've been really rationing myself on the last lot that I got. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about storm water and what it means to me and what I use it for. I personally can't remember where I first came across the idea that storm water would be good in spellcraft and would be powerful. It does make all the sense in the world, but I think the information does come from somewhere, doesn't it? Like when you first get into the craft, you read books, and then maybe when you get a bit older, or in my case, when I get a bit older, because I'm 31 now, you start to watch videos and like pay attention to what other witches are doing, and you exchange resources and information. So even though it kind of seems like it kind of seems like an organic thought process that you would use things like snow water and storm water. I do think you come across these ideas from books and from other witches. Like, I personally didn't come up with that by myself. That's something that I definitely either read in a book or heard from another witch that they were doing, and it struck me as something that really made sense, you know? Yeah, it just struck me as something that instantly made sense, instantly was something that I could get on board with and that I thought would help my magical practice and would make a really good tool. I've always been really interested in Thor. Thor is one of the gods that definitely has been of interest to me and has kind of glinted out of the corner of my eye for a good long while. And it's weird because I ended up getting with a boy who has Raijin, the Shinto god of thunder, as his patron and as his guide, his teacher, I suppose you could say. So there is really a thunder vibe, you know, in the home between us. I always was in love with thunder and lightning and storms. I was never one of those children that was afraid. I was always one of those kids that wanted to go out in it and walk around in it, and I have had many long romantic stormy walks with various different partners of mine. I remember when I was 15 years old just turning up at my girlfriend's house and like banging on her door and being like, we've got to go for a walk now, there's a storm coming. And then the rain just came and we were like in the middle of a field just dancing around and just being crazy in this amazing storm. And I've done that so many times. I love going for walks in storms. I think it's a real bonding experience. It's so lovely. I've gone running in storms as well, but that was actually not quite so consciously done. That was more like I was having a run and a storm came. A few people have asked me what I use storm water for, or what specifically it is useful for. Personally, I feel that correspondences do come from a really personal place, so I would never say that anything is written in stone. However, it is true that certain correspondences over time have just made a lot of sense to a lot of witches. You know, for example, not many of us say that rose quartz means something counter to the traditional correspondences we've come to know and love, which are about self-love and healing and all that kind of thing. And that's because, you know, stones do give off an energetic signature that makes sense to the vast majority of people. A lot of things give off a certain energy that affects you in a certain way and makes you feel like a certain thing can be accomplished if you use it, you know. So correspondences don't come from nowhere. I do think it's important that we question correspondences more rather than just taking ones that are handed down to us from books. I do personally notice young witches coming into the community and really just taking as gospel the correspondences for the colours and the correspondences for, you know, all of the herbs and things like that and crystals, without really actually kind of giving it a go and bonding with the stuff themselves and actually building more on those correspondences. But then maybe they will do that in their own time, but maybe at the beginning they just want something to put down in their book of shadows so they've got a starting point, which I definitely don't think there's anything wrong with. But I do super hope that young witches are knowing within themselves that they can choose their own correspondences. They can work out what works for them and what things mean for them, and it is okay if they choose to use a herb for something different, if it actually occurs to them that it's much more potent in a certain way according to their psyche and their practice, you know. I'm going massively off track, and that is what I wanted. I wanted Rambling Witch to be true to the name, Rambling Witch. So stormwater, what do I use it for? I think of stormwater as just having an energy of power, clout, pure fucking potency. Because if you think about how you feel during a storm, if I think about how I feel during a storm, how I felt during that storm the other night, oh my god, I was overwhelmed, I was astounded, I was awestruck, I was humbled by the magnitude of what was going on and the sound of it, and I just felt like the whole building that I live in was just rumbling, and just watching it made me feel so filled up to the top and filled up to overflowing with this sense of just being in awe. And I feel when I'm collecting stormwater that I'm collecting that thing that's making me feel that way, and I'm bottling it for my own purposes. I'm using it for my own stuff, you know, I'm taking that power and I'm actually using it. So for me, this is distilled storm energy. That's what it is. Oh, bless you, come in. I'm making a Rambling Witch video.
I've got 2 blood clot taters. I've got
moving jackets.
Yeah, going to do jackets.
I love jacket potato.
Beans. What else I got? I've got some falafel. I've got some hipster apples as well, so I thought I'd like bash this up a salad.
Oh, a hipster apple. I love a good hipster apple.
Yeah.
Mm.
Upper echelons of the Communist Party in China have been exposed in the Panama Papers.
Really?
Yeah, including one daughter or a guy who was actually responsible for the Tiananmen Square repression.
Fucking hell, who the fuck's next?
Oh, I know, mate. Got you something nice, didn't I?
Psychology's magazine! Oh, babe! Oh, thank you. I love you. Thank you very much.
Oh, you look lovely.
Oh, thank you. Oh, excuse me. I love it when you get me Psychology's magazine.
I know.
Thanks, Barry.
Favourite, isn't it?
Cheers, Barry.
Welcome.
That being said, I think storm water is therefore one of the best things that I can use when I want to give something some serious extra oomph, you know what I mean? And I feel like I can direct that power and potency towards a number of different things, or I can connect it to a number of different themes. One of the key things that I like to use storm water for is releasing stuff, getting rid of what no longer serves, cleansing the way, getting rid of what's no longer wanted, and actually just it's almost like breaking chains, you know, just clearing the foundations of any debris, because I feel like after a storm you do get that energy of freshness and that energy of renewal coming up off of the earth. A storm can be representative of a shift, you know, there's a definite shift in the air pressure after those two like layers of pressure meet and they do their thing and they have their dance. Then afterwards, you know, the atmosphere outside does feel different and things look different. I definitely feel like if you take that power of the storm that is literally represented in the manifestation of rain, and then you connect it to the energy of release and renewal and, like, you know, regeneration, starting again, I think that can be super powerful. Another thing that I use storm water for is for my chronic pain. I really like to have baths where I put a couple of drops of storm water in alongside, you know, a really nice bath bomb or some lovely bubbles, something from Lush. And that can be really helpful. That can just make me feel really rejuvenated and really strong in my core. I have been known to dab storm water on my temples and my wrists if I'm going to go into a situation where I feel I might need to be strong in my core and where I feel I might need to be very empowered. These can be situations that might involve tension, or they might involve me speaking my truth in a way that is going to be scary and is going to feel challenging for me. So a little bit of storm water goes a long way. If you just dab a little bit here and here or on the back of the neck, it just, I don't know, it just does something. It just changes the vibration, you know. It's a ritualistic thing to do, to tell yourself that you are ready, you know, and that you have Thor at your shoulder and you'll be okay. I've been known to put a few drops of storm water into my oil burner alongside the carrier oil or the water or whatever else I'm using. So I won't use all storm water as my carrier oil because it's very precious, you know, we don't get storms every 5 minutes, so I do like to kind of be a little bit careful with how much I use, but I will use water or a carrier oil. I'll put my essence of whatever in, and then I'll also put a few drops of storm water. I like to do this occasionally for client readings when I feel that a definite surge of healing is needed, and like I feel that I want to bring that energy of healing and regeneration into the reading, so that as I'm speaking or as I'm typing, whatever the case may be, I'm giving the client that, you know, that's coming out in what I'm saying. I'd love to know if any of you work with storm water or snow water. That would be really cool to know, and what you personally use it for and how you kind of make that association. I work with moon water. I think a lot of witches do work with moon water, where you basically leave the water on the windowsill or outside underneath the light of the full moon or the super moon, whatever the case may be, and you just allow the energies to be imbibed into the water, and then you just label it with the date or the intention or whatever you want to do, or just keep it in your drawer under your altar and use that. And I feel like that definitely has its own set of associations for me. I use moon water predominantly for inspiration, for getting that creative sense of autonomy and creative expression back. It can be really helpful for that, because the full moon and the super moon, not only do they make me feel so like glittery and effervescent and so ready to do something and so glowing, you know, glittering in my soul and ready to express things, but also you do get that energy of abundance. You get that high energy of materializing things, manifesting things coming to their full fruition, you know. I always feel that every single full moon is different for me, and I have different associations and different feelings, but underneath there's always threaded through a full moon this kind of Beltane energy, this energy of high summer, so that even in the dead of winter when I'm looking at a full moon, I just get that feeling. I get that feeling that something is on the verge of being fully birthed into the world, or has just been fully birthed into the world, into my world. God, I could ramble about that like indefinitely. I recently created some moon water that was imbibed in the light of the half moon, and this I'm planning to use for a couple of deep down delicious devotionals to my matron deity. Obviously a lot of witches charge their tarot decks and their crystals in the light of full moons and super moons, And I really like that we use the verb charge, you know, like you would charge a phone. For me, the lunar energy is often connected to the ideas of things like connection with the spirit realm, connection with the intuition, the ability to download deep insights, the ability to work with disembodied intelligence and that kind of thing. The moon is representative of the craft for me in a great many ways, personally, on a personal level. And so I feel like charging my tools, charging crystals, charging decks and that kind of stuff, that makes so much sense, because it's almost like charging it in the light of the mothership. That's how I feel. I feel like the mothership is overhead, and I feel like I'm just placing my possessions into its amazing light and just getting that kind of, it's like getting a postcard from home almost, you know. It's weird to explain, but I'm sure some people watching know what I mean. So I was in my business group a few weeks ago, and somebody posted a link to a Bust magazine article and asked me if I'd seen it yet. So I clicked on it, and I'm quite a fan of Bust magazine. And yeah, it was basically a list of 20 witchy Instagram accounts that were like, you know, Instagram accounts to watch if you like witchy shizzle. And I was number one. I was really like, oh my god, I'm in Bust magazine. Bust magazine, look at my Instagram account. That's so cool. The person that wrote the article did anyway. Also, aside from my Instagram account being on the list, which was super awesome, it also gave me a chance to look through and see loads of other Instagram accounts that I'm not following yet, and just be like, oh, I'm not following that person. That person looks really cool. So I disappeared into a vortex of witchy Instagramming. I'll leave the article down below. That was really cool, because it was cool for me to see my Instagram account from an outside perspective. Like, I'm aware that I do post pictures of my crystals and my decks and my altar and stuff on Instagram, but I'm also aware that I post a lot of stuff that really has not that much to do in an overt way with my witchy life, you know, like green smoothies and what I'm doing with my hair and, you know, that kind of thing. So it was cool to know that I would be considered to be, to have like a witchy Instagram account, because I suppose when you're doing your Instagram, you don't really think about what it is that you're really conveying, what it is that you're putting forth. I know that I have a strong sense of what I like aesthetically and what I find aesthetically pleasing. And I know that for me, I have a very strong sense of what I want to share with people in the online realm and what I do not. And for me, when I'm coming at it from the perspective of my creative project and my business, which is Kellyanne Maddox and kellyannemaddox.com, it's different to when I'm kind of presenting something for people in real life, for want of a better term. Like, there are certain things that I'm not going to share. Like, for example, last weekend I went to a hen do for my friend and hung out with girls all day, and we made some bunting, we went on a boat trip, and, you know, then we went for a cheeky tapas in the evening and stuff. That kind of thing. Ordinary, everyday shizzle kind of stuff. Not that there was anything ordinary about it, it was fucking amazing. But do you know what I mean? That stuff that is not linked specifically to the topics that I talk about here. I'm not going to show that stuff on Instagram. I'm not going to show pictures of me with my family. I'm not going to show pictures of me on a date with my boyfriend. It will be very rare. It will be the odd time, you know. I do share occasionally a photo of me and the man badger or whatever, but I like to keep things on topic, so I like to categorise. I'm a categoriser of stuff. And I have a very strong sense of what I want to share in my witchy life and with the community, and what is actually not relevant and so isn't to be shared, you know. So it was really cool to see that my Instagram account does convey enough of what I'm doing and what I believe to actually help people to see what, you know, what goes on in the life of a witch and what a witch's altar does look like, and just give that little glance into my practice, because my practice is so central to who I am and it really is a big part of my personality, and I wasn't really sure whether or not I was showing that in any major way, so it's cool to know that I am. I've discovered that my man badger's lizard Vella is quite keen on firelight. Like, she's actually able to look at my altar from where she's positioned now. And that is weird, because a couple of times I've been doing a ritual. There was one time specifically where I was doing this really in-depth ritual, and I was actually about to throw the runes, and I had like the whole altar lit up like a Christmas tree. And basically, yeah, I just sensed that something or someone was like looking at me, and it was kind of weird. And I saw, like, out of the corner of my eye, Vella had just moved all the way up to this side of her case, which is closer to like the altar, and she had her hands up on the glass and she's just staring at my altar, like, and then she just sort of like turned her head slowly to look at me like, what the fuck are you doing? It was so funny. That can be distracting. I also was burning a healing candle. I've got a healing candle on my altar, and I really fancied burning it for a couple of my clients the other day while I was doing video readings. So I was set up on the floor doing my video readings, and literally halfway through a video reading I turned around and there she was with her bloody face pressed up against the glass staring at this candle like a little reptilian face. And it was really I think I lost my train of thought for a second, so I'm talking to my client and I'm like, and yeah, so and this card, would you stop it, go away for God's sake, I'm working. I don't know how many of you are reading Thorn Mooney's articles over on Pathos, but if you're not, then you should be. They're amazing. She's an incredible writer. I love the way that she approaches topics, and she just is quite bold as well about the things that she is approaching and addressing, which I really appreciate. I love knowing what she thinks about things, you know, and even if essentially we fundamentally disagree, it's always such a pleasure to know what she's thinking. I just love it, and I'll always sit down and watch. And so yeah, being able to read her stuff on Pathos is really cool. I'll link below to the index of the articles that she's written so far, and I'll also link to a particular article that she wrote recently about the use of blood and bones in magic, and about this idea that seems to be doing the rounds, that the use of these things almost legitimizes the witch or somehow takes their magic to the next level. And she was kind of questioning how much of this belief is underpinned by true kind of belief or true knowledge or a true understanding of where these bones come from, what they mean, what is the point of using blood in magic, why, you know, and how much of it is ego, how much of it is for a sense of kind of building a persona, and then how much of it is actually with a point, how much of it is done with a point. I shared this particular article on my Facebook page because I thought it was really cool, and a lot of people responded to it in a really amazing way, and the discussion was popping underneath as well. It was really cool. So definitely I would recommend reading that because it's something to think about, I think. I personally work with a goddess that a lot of people would consider to be pretty badass. Now this is actually a total misconception because anybody who works with Aphrodite knows that she is 100% badass too. All goddesses are badass in their own ways, but I think with the way that Hel is presented in popular culture, you know, the way that we think of her as being half skeleton, half maiden, just even her name alone, I think that the associations with her is very much about, like, people would not be surprised to see an all black altar with skulls, or, you know, would not be surprised maybe to find out that I use blood. I personally feel like, for me, aesthetics are an important part of what I do. Like, I do not always really think that there needs to be an uber deep reason to have something on my altar, and I know that a lot of people do, and I think that's absolutely fine. And actually, to be fair, when I had a smaller altar space, I was a lot more selective about what I put on there. I still did put things on there just for the fuck of it, just because I thought they looked cool, just because they gave me a certain emotional association, and it was no deeper than that. But I did used to have, like, you know, quite a small altar space, so I'd want to be reasonably selective so I could make sure that I got my working candle on there and other things, you know, my prayer beads that I always used and stuff like that. Whereas now I've got rather a large altar top, so I can maybe be a little bit more playful and experimental. But I've always been that way. I've always chosen certain things for the aesthetics alone. That's not to say that I use those things in my spellcraft. So for example, if I found a deer skull, I would probably bring it home and set it on the altar, because it just looks fucking cool. And it gives me a certain association. It downloads me with a certain energy signature that I personally feel that it kind of, it gives me a certain vibe, you know, like any aesthetic. Like certain kinds of architecture give you a certain kind of feel, you know. Certain kinds of interior decoration will give you a certain kind of feel. And for me, it's the same with how my altar looks. When I use things in spellcraft, that's different. That's definitely different. I would not use things in my spellcraft and in my ritual that were just, you know, for the look, you know, just to get that look. I have a skull kind of candle holder that's on the hell side of my altar, and I have like images of skulls and stuff like that. It makes total sense, right? You know, she's a death goddess, and you can see half of her skull in all of the images of her archetype that there are. I must admit, I do not only connect by any means with these popular images of her, I connect with the essence of her archetype way above and beyond any image of her. But yeah, when you look at images of her, like, her skull is on display, so it kind of makes sense, of course, that I've got skulls on that side of the altar, and that side of the altar is for sure darker. You know, if you come into the room and look at the altar just on face value, you've got one side that's very colourful, very pretty. You could argue it's girly to an extent, and then on the other side of the altar, you've just got kind of a lot of black cauldron, black candles, black photo frame with a goddess with half of her face off. You know what I mean? Like, and skulls and stuff. That is intentional to an extent, and I definitely don't think that real bones would be out of place on that side of the altar. I'm not going out of my way to get them or anything like that. It's not something that I've really kind of got my eye on and that I'm really thinking about, but I definitely can see how some people could end up using that for as an aesthetic thing. I think every witch needs to go into their own heart and be honest with themselves about the extent to which they do things from an egoic place for their practice, especially if they're exposing anything about their practice online or talking about it online. And that's got to be something that is meted out in the heart of the witch. But I definitely think that there is a trend, you know, there's definitely a trend at the moment of discussions popping up about the use of menstrual blood in magic, and also about, of course, a woman's right to use menstrual blood in her magic. I think it's cool to have those discussions from the perspective of people that might want to do away with the idea that menstrual blood is somehow shameful or it somehow doesn't have a place in magic. I know that Jude directed a video, and I know she doesn't have it on YouTube anymore, but she did a video a while ago, a year or so ago I think, about how magic doesn't need to be sterilised. You know, magic doesn't need to be this clean, sterile, antiseptically wiped thing that has nothing to do with blood or sweat or, you know, gore or dirt or death or decay or any of those things. And she was talking at one point specifically about the use of menstrual blood and the use of like semen and things like that, and spit, fingernails and things like that. And she was talking about how, you know, the use of blood is so powerful because you've got your unique DNA in there, and it is the life force, it's what pumps the oxygen around your body, you know what I mean? So that was very interesting to me, that you can come at that discussion from a place of wanting to do away with ideas that magic needs to be, you know, crisp and clean and Instagram ready. That is not what it's about. At the same time, magic is not about blood and bones and stuff. Those things are optional, but I think it becomes dangerous when we try to make other witches feel that their craft is not legitimate if they would not use blood or bones, or somehow that they are not a real witch if they are disgusted by the idea of using blood and bones, because of course that's not true either, you know, so both sides of the spectrum can get a little problematic. I've personally never really thought of using my own blood in magic. It's not something that I've ever considered doing. I have used my own hair when I make poppets for the purposes of healing magic for myself, or to make a certain thing come to pass, and I want to use that old school sympathetic magic vibe, then yeah, definitely, of course, I will put my own hair and my own fingernails into the doll. That's just keeping it trad, baby. That's just, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Sometimes you've got to go that traditional route to get what you need, you know, to get done what you need to get done. You know, every so often somebody asked me in the comment section if I could please film myself doing a spell or film myself doing a ritual, you know, that they actually want to see it happen, or to film me carving out sacred space. To me, I'm just going to get it out there right now. That is no different to asking me if I can please film myself having sex with my boyfriend and post it on the internet. Like, that is some deeply personal shit right there. That is how I feel. You know, I've often said that I'm terminally solitary. It's just how I am, and it's how I'm going to stay. And I feel like there's nothing wrong with coven magic or doing magic with others. I'm not saying that those people feel their magic and ritual less than I do in some way, but for me, the intimacy and the meaning and the potency and the state that I get into sometimes when I'm doing magic and ritual as well, that stuff ain't for sharing, you know, that's just for me. There was some guy in my comment section the other day, it was so funny, I was laughing my arse off because he was accusing me of wearing a cheap wig, and I just thought it was so funny that that he thought my hair was a wig, you know. I guess you could be forgiven for thinking that this is a wig, but this is not a wig, people, okay? I just bleached the shit out of my hair. I fancied a change. But this guy was like underneath one of my videos where I have black hair, accusing me of wearing a cheap wig. He was asking, like, why doesn't this woman make a servitor that can heal terminal cancer? Why doesn't she show us this servitor? Why doesn't she invite this servitor into the room so we can see this servitor on film? And it's just like, Pickle, you really haven't read the 101 manual, have you? Like, it does not work like that. There are other realms aside from this one. I know that's hurting your head, but Just take a seat and think it through. That was kind of more sarcastic, you know, somebody asking me, well, why don't you just bring the servitor on now? You know, give the servitor a little bit of time on camera. But there are other people who do legitimately ask me, like, can you please film your, you know, your making of sacred space and your ritual or your spell work or whatever. Like, I need to see it happen in order for me to understand how to do it. And you know what? That's a myth. You do not need to see it happen to understand how to do it, because everything that you would need to see about the way I do my magic is really in here, you know? It's not about a series of gestures. It's not about tools. It's not really about the order in which you do things. You can do all of that stuff and you can do it to perfection, you know, you can really sharpen it and polish it, but if you are not present and if you are not bringing your whole self into the equation, then none of that other stuff is going to matter. And I have done some incredibly simple magic in my time, magic that has involved no tools whatsoever. When I had really bad chronic pain, there was no way I could sit in front of my altar. I used to travel to my astral altar and do magic on the astral while I was lying on my back in agony, you know, waiting for the fucking Valium to kick in. Magic is about here, it's about here, and so you definitely don't need to see what I do, you know, nor would I ever show you what I do. Same way I wouldn't show you, you know, myself taking a shit or having a fuck. It would not happen. Like, that stuff is personal. I definitely don't begrudge anybody asking, because I feel like if they're asking politely and they're not trying to be rude, I do feel like it's something that you don't know until you know, especially since you can go onto the internet and see people doing rituals. People are comfortable to film it sometimes, particularly covens are often, you know, happy to film something that they've done in group work and put it on the internet or whatever. So I definitely don't begrudge people asking, but that is my answer, you know, like, it's a deeply, deeply personal thing and there is no way in hell that I would ever film it. So I was talking to a client the other day about sacred space, the nature of sacred space and the uses for it and stuff, and how one goes about actually creating sacred space. And I explained that I never used to actually draw it out in a literal physical way, you know. I would go through times in my life, particularly when I was younger, where I'd have very little space to work with, and so it wouldn't actually make sense to go around and draw it out in a physical way. I also used to feel like drawing it out in a physical way actually didn't help me to get into the ritual mindset, because I was kind of imagining the sacred space far too literally. So it was actually bringing me down into the physical and into consensus reality, rather than actually preparing me to elevate off of, you know, the realm of consensus reality. Does that make sense? So for example, let's say I'm walking around the room and I'm like using my finger or a wand or whatever I want to use as an extension of my finger, a fork, a rolled up magazine, and I'm going around and I'm like visualizing actually cutting out, you know, with white light or whatever, a circle around where I'm going to do my magic. That to me just reminds me that I'm like in a room and there's a pile of washing over there, and you know what I mean? It doesn't really work for me all of the time, or it certainly didn't back then in a lot of situations. Sometimes it can be difficult when your altar is in an awkward place. It can be difficult to draw sacred space in that literal way, where you literally draw it on the ground where you are. It can be difficult to do that if your altar is, for example, like in a wardrobe or in part of a chest of, like a sort of a display cabinet or whatever kind of thing. It can be difficult to do it if you've got like laundry everywhere, or if you've just got clutter, or if you generally, the bed is in the way and so you can't make a full circle. That can feel weird and distracting and kind of just a little bit frustrating. And I do sometimes feel like witches probably muddle through with this very kind of classic mainstream idea that you carve out sacred space by literally carving out sacred space, and they muddle through even though they're very frustrated by that idea and it doesn't really work for them. I have a few ways that I like to carve out sacred space that do not involve actually physically walking around the room and like throwing salt or visualizing light or any of those things. One thing that I like to do is to create the sacred space on the astral. So basically I sit down in front of my altar and I have not carved out sacred space, and I actually go to an astral anchor, an astral jumping point if you will, and I create the sacred space there. And it's actually in a forest clearing, and it's a place that I've been to in my active imagination journeys many times before, and I actually draw out the sacred space there. And once I draw it out there, it is almost like as above so below. It's done in the physical, it's done on the physical. And I wanted to put that out there as a suggestion for anybody who's having like sacred space woes, that it might be something worthwhile thinking about doing your own spin on that, you know, taking that idea and using it. Because I tend to find that things really feel like, if I have told myself that I am in the bubble of sacred light and I absolutely, that energy is potent, the vibration is high and everything is on lock, I feel like once I've done that in the astral, if I've really taken myself there and given myself that incredibly potent visualization experience, it is then taking place on the physical. It feels like that. When I open my eyes in front of my altar after I've carved sacred space on the astral, at my special astral jumping spot, my jumping point if you will, I feel like it's on lock in the physical as well. I sometimes just use crystals to mark out points on the floor, where I feel like that's roughly where the bubble is going to be, that's roughly where the circle is going to be laid out. So rather than like carving a very, very severe circle, like going around and throwing the soul or whispering the mantra and actually moving around the room, if I feel like, well, I don't really want to do that because that makes me feel very much like I'm literally in this room, you know, and I cannot get a very big circle in this room. If I was going to do a full circle all the way around the altar, I would be bumping in, like I'd have to cut the light. I call it the light because when I'm visualising actually creating a circle, it's a white blade of light that I personally use. For me, I'd have to go through the vivarium and I have to go through my boyfriend's altar and I have to go through, like, you know, I mean, it's a nice big room, it's a reasonably big room, but it's not big enough to get that grand, very grandiose, big scale circle. So what I like to do is just go around and whisper a mantra over a little crystal, like a gemstone, and I place it down. Then I whisper the mantra over another and I place it down. Then I whisper another and I place it down. And so I'm not being overly precious about actually the shape of it, you know. It is going to be a little bit ramshackle, a little bit higgledy-piggledy, but it works. Another thing that I really love to do is I love to imagine that a force field emanates from me outwards and actually sticks outwards. This might be a little bit trippy for some people, but what I do is I sit in front of my altar, I close my eyes, and I begin to do a grounding and rooting visualization, where I imagine, you know, that I'm rooted to the earth and the roots are going all the way down and they're going into the ground and they're stabilizing me. And then I feel like, you know, the rod of energy, that's that stabilizing force, come right up through my core, and I imagine it going through me, and then I imagine it emanating out as though lots of veins are coming from it. And basically what I'm doing is I'm trying to charge myself up. I'm feeling that power. If you tense all your muscles like that, you know, and then you tense them again, and you tense them again, then you get that sense of something is happening, you know, the vibration is changing. It's very much like that with this. I'll do this for about 10 or 15 minutes and I'll do a breathing exercise alongside it, which again makes me feel very stabilised, but also very potent, you know. At the key moment when I want to create sacred space, what I will do is either clap my hands, click my fingers, or use a specific word or mantra of my own devising. I have a couple, obviously I'm not going to tell you what they are. You have to go and invent your own. But yeah, I use something like that, and what I imagine in that moment is that the force, the power that I've built up within me actually jumps from my body and goes outwards into a bubble. It's a bubble of like an energetic wall, okay? And there's this particular sound that I hear when I imagine this. It's a little bit like when you run your hand around the top of a crystal glass and you get that sound. That's the sound that I imagine. And doing that, I imagine that the bubble forms perfectly and then it just hardens and it stays. And that's it. Sacred space has been created. I'm ready. I hope that these tips on different ways to create sacred space have been helpful for you. I really don't want people to feel like they have to just, you know, they have to do the thing that they see other witches doing, or they have to do the thing that's explained in the book. That way of creating sacred space simply just does not work for everybody. And I know that for me, sometimes just activating and aligning my chakras has felt very much as though I have created sacred space, in the sense that I have actually tinkered with and engineered my aura so that everything is working beautifully. And if I'm in my room and I feel perfectly safe and I feel perfectly good and I know that no one's going to come in and interrupt and I just feel really swell about everything, then sometimes there's no point really in creating that bigger area of sacred space. It's more just about getting right with my aura and making my aura into that sacred space. So sometimes just aligning the chakras can be good. And the way that I decide what to do exactly is just through listening to my gut, it's through listening to my intuition. The same way sometimes I will not always know what kind of magic is necessary, or what kind of ritual or what kind of act is necessary. I go to the altar and I allow my intuition to just give me what I need in that moment and tell me what it is that I need to do. This has been an episode of Rambling Witch. I have rambled, but that is definitely not false advertising. On this occasion, I told you I was going to ramble, and I fucking did ramble, and I hope it was good for you. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you might want me to talk about in the next episode of Rambling Witch. This has been really cool. It's been really chill because I've not been on a teaching flex. I've just been like, you know, just calm and not even knowing what I'm going to talk about, and stuff just came out and it was all good, so I'm really happy about that. Don't forget to check out Thorne's links below for the Patheos article and the Patheos index. I'll also link you below to her Facebook page where she just updates when she's written something on Patheos, and I'll update you to her YouTube channel because she has a YouTube channel, so yay Thorne! I look forward to reading the comments underneath this video. If you have thoughts, if you have, you know, your own experiences you want to share with me, please do so, and thank you so much for watching. Much love, blessed be.